In the gentle stillness of Tuscany, where cypress trees guard the hills and bell towers rise like prayers in stone, a flame was born that would not burn on altars, but in the silence of a humble room. Her name was Gema, and her soul, like the lily among thorns, bloomed in the midst of pain, solitude, and the fire of the invisible. She was not a convent princess nor a revered abbess. She did not found orders or leave theological treatises, and yet her life was a gospel written in blood, tears, and wounds that imitated those of her crucified spouse. She was a young girl from the village, quiet and fragile, but her heart became an altar alight, where Christ would once again live his passion in a vivid and pulsing way. Orphaned of her mother at 7 and soon after of her father, she knew early the wound of abandonment. But she did not become bitter. She offered herself. From a young age, she knew that the cross was not a punishment, but an invitation. And she accepted that call with a docility that shook those around her. Prayer was her language, silence her nourishment, and the will of God her only homeland. She endured terrible illnesses, demonic attacks, misunderstandings even from those who loved her most. But she never gave in to discouragement. She saw Jesus in every night of fever, and his gaze, like a sword of tenderness, transfigured her. There was no part of her life that was not offered, each breath, each heartbeat, each tear. She longed with all her being to consecrate herself in a convent, but heaven had other plans. Her cloister would be the home of relatives. Her rule, obedience. Her spiritual director, a confessor guided by divine prudence. Her cross, the same Christ, bleeding, who would appear to her and speak with her. And so, without a habit or public vows, she lived as a perfect religious. She experienced ecstasies, stigmata, mystical locutions. She fought face to face with the devil. She offered her life for sinners. And when the fire finally consumed her young body, she left not ashes, but fragrance. This is the story of a virgin madly in love with the crucified, of a hidden mystic, of a fiery flower planted in the land of Lucca. This is Saint Gema Galgani, the beloved daughter of the Passion, the veilless virgin who wed the Lamb with all her soul. Gema Galgani was born on March 12, 1878, in the city of Lucca, Italy, under the soft Tuscan sun that filtered through medieval towers and silent porticos. She was the 5th of 8 children born into a deeply Christian family. Her father, Enrico Galgani, was an honest and generous pharmacist. Her mother, Aurelia, a pious woman who planted the first seed of faith in her daughter's soul. From her earliest days, Gema showed an unusual sensitivity, an almost supernatural tenderness that made her weep when she saw others suffer and withdraw into prayer with a devotion that astonished those around her. From the age of 5, Gema spoke of Jesus as though she had seen him. It was not childish imagination, but a familiarity that bewildered those who heard her. She said that Jesus called her, that he wanted her for himself, and that one day she would marry him. She asked her mother questions no child her age would ask. Why did Jesus suffer so much? Why don't men love him? Aurelia responded gently, but in her heart she knew that this child did not belong entirely to the earth. When Gema was just 7 years old, her mother died after a long illness. It was the first heavy cross on her small shoulders. The desolation that filled her heart was not expressed in cries, but in a silent, mature, and surprising acceptance. Before the coffin, she did not weep uncontrollably. Instead, she knelt, prayed the rosary, and offered her pain to God. That simple and heroic act marked the beginning of a life shaped by the cross. After the death of her mother, Gema was sent to the Sisters of Santa Zita school for a time. There she found an environment conducive to her thirst for God. The nuns were amazed by her composure, her perfect obedience, and her love for the Blessed Sacrament. Gema confessed frequently, and spent long hours in the chapel. On one occasion, she was found weeping while gazing at a crucifix. When asked the reason, she replied, "I am consoling Jesus because many abandon him." At the age of 9, she received her first communion. She experienced that day as a true marriage. She prepared with rigorous fasting, nightly vigils, and a devotion that inflamed her companions. Later she would write, "I didn't know how to contain the love that burned in my chest. I wanted to die of happiness." From that moment on, the Eucharist became her life, her longing, her center. When she couldn't receive communion, she suffered a pain that was only alleviated by praying before the tabernacle. However, happiness was soon mixed with suffering once again. Her father, who had been the family's support, fell into financial ruin. Soon after, he became gravely ill and passed away, leaving Gemma and her siblings in utter poverty. Destitute, orphaned, and without resources, she was taken in by the Giannini family, who, unknowingly, would become witnesses to the silent miracle that was her life. From then on, she lived between school, household chores, and prayer. But her soul was already walking down a different path. She did not participate in the amusements of the young girls her age. She did not speak in vain. She did not adorn herself. She rejected any vanity with a serene naturalness, without pride or condemnation. Her only desire was to belong entirely to Jesus. She began to dream of the convent, the habit, the sacred vows. But heaven had a different, deeper path for her. Despite her desire to consecrate herself, her health slowly began to deteriorate. First it was back pain, then constant fevers, weakness, and finally, an unrelenting diagnosis, a severe spinal condition. Gema was confined to a bed with intense pain that kept her from moving. But she never murmured. Rather, she prayed with even greater fervor, offering each pang of pain as a flower for the invisible altar of her soul. During this period of suffering, heaven began to draw nearer to her life. Sometimes as she prayed, she entered such deep states of recollection that it seemed she was asleep, but within she experienced a loving dialogue with the Lord. Her gaze became luminous, her body calmed, and an unusual peace enveloped the room. The nuns who visited her noticed a special presence. "There is something here that is not human," one of them said. There were no clear visions, no stigmata, no extraordinary phenomena, but the presence of the beloved began to announce itself in her soul. Gema, though still young, had become an offering victim, a hidden host, a little lamb of the invisible altar. Pain did not break her, it lifted her, and every tear she shed in silence was like a petal offered to heaven. In that atmosphere of pain, abandonment, faith, and tenderness, a holiness began to bloom that was not yet understood, but was beginning to write with fire the story of one of the most fervent souls heaven has ever gifted to the earth. Illness was not an accident in the life of Gema Galgani. It was a grace disguised as suffering. Her body, so young and fragile, began to show severe symptoms of vertebral osteitis, a disease that inflamed the spinal cord, paralyzed the lower limbs, and caused unbearable pain. The medicine of the time declared itself powerless. The doctors tried everything possible, even painful procedures, but to no avail. Gema, lying on her bed, did not ask for relief. She asked for strength. She asked that her pain not be wasted, but that it might serve God, rescue souls, and offer her life as a sacrifice. Her days were spent in a dark room, lying on a bed where she could hardly move. Fever was constant, and pain was sharp. Sometimes she would lose consciousness for hours, and at other times she would deliriously talk through the night. But when she woke up, the first thing she did was kiss the crucifix. "Jesus, you too were lying down," she would say. "Make me faithful." It was as if her soul already inhabited another dimension, beyond physical pain, as if each sting were a heartbeat of love. In the midst of that bodily darkness, lights from heaven began to shine. One day, while she was alone and weakened, Gema saw a young man with a luminous face at the foot of her bed. It was not an imaginary vision, but a real, tangible apparition. He introduced himself as the Archangel Gabriel of the Dolorous, a Passionist religious who had died a few years before. He would be her guide, her protector, her spiritual brother on the path of the cross. From then on, Gema's life began to unfold between two worlds: the world of the earth, marked by illness and solitude, and the world of heaven, filled with celestial visits, mystical consolations, and calls to holiness. The angel did not come just to comfort her. He taught her to suffer with love, not to seek relief, and to transform herself into a living host. On many occasions, he took her hand to guide her in meditating on the passion of Christ. Gema wept as she recalled each thorn, each strike, each fall of her beloved. One day, the Virgin Mary appeared to her, not with the radiance of glory, but with such maternal tenderness that it made Gema burst into uncontrollable tears. Mary promised her that she would intercede for her healing, but on the condition that Gema would accept to unite more deeply with the cross of her son. Gema, without hesitation, agreed. "Mother, if you ask, I accept everything." And then, against all human expectations, a miracle happened. Gema was healed. From one day to the next, the pain ceased, the fever disappeared, and the doctors were left speechless. But the young girl did not celebrate as others would. She did not rejoice in being able to walk again, but in being able to love more and serve better. She knew that this healing was not a reward, but a preparation for a higher mission. Recovered, she began to live with even more intensity. She woke early, prayed for hours, and meditated on the Passion with a depth that broke her soul. She did not complain about anything. She accepted humiliations with joy, helped with household chores as if they were heavenly treasures. But every Friday, her body entered again into the mystery. She felt the weight of the cross, the pain of the scourging, the thirst of Golgotha. She did not yet have visible stigmata, but her soul was already wounded on the inside. These moments were secret, hidden. Gema tried to conceal them. She did not want to draw attention. If anyone noticed something strange, she would attribute it to fatigue or devotion. Only her confessor, Father Germain de San Estanislao, began to perceive the magnitude of the mystery unfolding. Gema wrote letters filled with fervor, simplicity, and theological depth, not learned from books, but received in prayer. Sometimes, in the early hours of the morning, she would wake up with an invisible presence beside her bed. Other times, she would enter into ecstasy and remain motionless for hours, her face bathed in tears. "Jesus spoke to me," she would say afterward. "He asked for more love, more souls, more cross." Her life, invisible to the world, was a continuous struggle between the weakness of the body and the greatness of the spirit. Thus, in the silence of her room, a mystical understanding of the cross began to take shape. She did not seek glory or comfort, but only to unite herself with the crucified Christ. Each day was a new offering, each pain a new step, each silence a word spoken to heaven. The altar of her illness became the forge where her soul burned without consuming itself. And although the world did not yet know it, in that young, sick, hidden, and silent girl, God was performing wonders that would make heaven tremble. Gema was already living in the threshold between heaven and earth. Her soul, purified by pain and ignited by love, had become a sanctuary where God dwelled with familiarity. She did not wear a habit nor follow monastic rules, but her heart was more monastic than many cloisters. That simple corner where she lived with the Giannini family had, without them fully knowing it, become an ante-room of Calvary. Her life flowed between simple tasks, deep prayers, and sublime ecstasies. She took care of household chores with humility and gratitude, scrubbing floors, caring for children, cooking, sewing. But at the same time, her soul was visited by invisible realities that defied all human logic. Jesus called her, spoke to her, formed her. Mary instructed her, Saint Gabriel accompanied her, the angels guarded her, and she, without vanity or pretense, accepted everything with the docility of a child. Fridays were days of intense spiritual experience. From Thursday night, she would begin to prepare herself more deeply. Her face would change. She grew pale, her eyes would sink, and her breathing would slow. By noon, she would enter into ecstasy. She would kneel, stretch out her arms, and slowly her body would begin to show the signs of the Passion. Open wounds on her hands, feet, and side. Blood flowing, suffering so vivid it froze the blood of those who witnessed it. Father Germain de San Estanislao, a Passionist priest, was a witness to these phenomena and documented them with scrupulous caution. He knew it wasn't imagination or hysteria. Gema did not seek these gifts. On the contrary, she prayed to Jesus that he would hide them if they caused scandal or attracted curiosity. "My Jesus, hide me," she would say. "Make it so that only you are seen." And indeed, although her body showed the extraordinary, her soul was immersed in humility. During the ecstasies, she spoke with Jesus. She offered him everything, her health, her life, her soul. She asked about sinners, interceded for priests, and prayed for comfort for the sick. Her words, sometimes written afterward, were like flames. "Jesus, give me your cross. I do not want to live without it. Give me souls. Take everything from me, but do not take away your love." In those moments, her face was transfigured. It was not emotional exaltation, but a deep peace, a joy that came from union with the crucified. However, her mystical life was not limited to Fridays. Daily she was visited by Christ. Sometimes she saw him with the crown of thorns, other times with a serene face or carrying the cross. On one occasion he appeared to her covered in wounds, with eyes full of sadness. "Who has done this to you?" Gema asked, crying. And Jesus replied, "Those who forget me." From then on, Gema offered each action, every breath, every pain, to repair the world's forgetfulness. Satan also made his presence known. He attacked her furiously, dragging her across the floor, tearing off medals, breaking crucifixes. He threatened to destroy her. But she, still trembling, would respond, "Do what you want. Jesus is stronger." When she could no longer fight, she would simply say, "Jesus, Mary," and the enemy would flee. The battle was real, continuous, invisible to the eyes of the world, but heroic before the angels. Gema wrote letters to her confessor, detailing these experiences. She did not write them out of pride, but out of obedience. Her writings are of a heartbreaking beauty, mystical, theological, poetic. She spoke of the soul as a bride, of Jesus as the bridegroom, and the cross as the throne. They were not fantasies, but deep, lived experiences that came from the heart. Those who lived with her, even though they didn't always understand, noticed her peace. She was not an exalted or unbalanced young woman. She was serene, kind, and simple. She smiled, served, and remained silent. Only when Jesus took hold of her did everything change. She became fire, she became an altar, she became a living host. This was how Gema lived, between the invisible and the everyday, between the kitchen and Golgotha, between household chores and the flames of divine love. A mystic without a veil, yes, but more veiled in God than many consecrated souls. Her body was on earth, but her soul was already beginning to dwell in heaven. Gema's union with Jesus reached an intimacy rarely known by the human soul. It was no longer just fervent devotion, but a spiritual marriage sealed with blood and silence. Christ had asked her to follow him to Calvary, not as a spectator, but as a bride. And she, with the generosity of the saints, had said yes, not with words, but with the totality of her life. The last months of Gema Galgani's life were the culmination of her Via Crucis, the invisible seal of a life offered as a holocaust. Tuberculosis, that silent disease that consumes slowly but relentlessly, took hold of her body with a cruelty that medicine could barely mitigate. Her breathing grew weaker, her strength diminished, her young body transformed into a chalice that slowly emptied. But her soul, far from fading, shone with a serenity that only those who love to the extreme can have. From her bed, Gema gazed at the crucifix that hung before her. "Jesus, I'm ready," she would say. "Don't leave me alone in the hour of the final battle." Her face, though emaciated, radiated peace. Her eyes, no longer with human light, still held a soft glow, as though they were gazing at something others could not see. Celestial visitations did not cease. St. Gabriel remained by her side. The Virgin caressed her tenderly. Jesus spoke to her like a bridegroom already approaching the threshold of eternity. She did not ask for relief, healing, or human comfort. Her only request was to suffer with love and in silence. Every night, the fever intensified, the blood vomiting became more frequent, and the pain more intense. But even then, she did not murmur. She would say, "Thank you, Jesus. Every thorn is a kiss from you." Her strength bewildered those who cared for her. No one could understand how such a fragile young woman could endure so much without fainting. In the days leading up to her death, she could barely move. But when she heard the name of Jesus, her lips would stir. If they brought her a crucifix, she would kiss it with tears. If anyone tried to alleviate her, she would thank them but say, "No, let me be like this. I want to resemble my bridegroom more." Her confessor brought her the Holy Communion, and in that final Eucharist, Gema united herself as never before. She closed her eyes and remained motionless for hours. She was the bride who receives the bridegroom on their last night. On Holy Saturday, in 1903, Luca woke in silence. It was a day of waiting, of vigil. In a modest room, Gema breathed her last. No screams, no laments, no sighs were heard. She died as she lived, quietly, with the rosary in her hands, the crucifix on her chest, and a slight smile that remained etched on her face. She was only 25 years old. Those who watched over her were overwhelmed. It was not the body of a young sick girl, it was the body of a saint. Her face seemed transfigured, her skin emitted a soft fragrance, and her body remained without rigidity. A sister who knew her exclaimed, "God has passed through here." And so it was. In that humble room, heaven had descended to take his bride. The funeral was simple. There were no expensive flowers, no speeches. But testimonies began to pour in, healings, conversions, favors. Her confessor wrote her story, and soon the process of her beatification began. In 1933, Pope Pius XI canonized her, presenting her to the world as a model of holiness for the youth, patroness of students, victim soul, and passionate flower. Today, her incorrupt body rests in Lucca, where thousands of faithful come to touch the fiery silence of her life. Her letters, her ecstasies, and her spiritual diary are treasures of mystical love. But more than all that, what remains is her example, that of a young woman who did not need grand stages to shine, nor pulpits to teach. She only needed a cross, an ignited heart, and total surrender. Because Gema did not die, she was taken. She did not expire, she was embraced. And in her final breath, she whispered to the heavens what she had said all her life. "Jesus, you are my everything." Saint Gema Galgani did not write treatises or preach great sermons. She did not found religious orders or live in a visible cloister. But her existence was a temple, her soul a gospel, and her life one of the most sublime pages in Christian mysticism. She was a young woman without applause, without cameras, without crowds, yet her voice still resonates like a burning echo in the halls of heaven. Those who visit her in Lucca, where her incorrupt body rests, do not find an imposing figure, but a small urn that holds the mystery of a hidden holiness. But when they look at her serene face, the faithful understand that here rests someone who lived in the invisible what many fail to achieve even in the visible, a life completely united to God's will. She is the patroness of students because she studied the heart of Jesus like no one else. She's a model for the sick because she turned suffering into an altar. She's a guide for the young because she was a saint from her childhood. She is a companion to the mystics because her soul was a heaven inhabited. And above all, she is a light in the night of this world, discreet, pure, embraced by the cross. The Church calls her the beloved daughter of the Passion, and it is no exaggeration. No flower has bloomed as close to the wood as she did. She lived what she contemplated, suffered what she meditated, and loved what she imitated. And in every gesture, in every silence, in every drop of blood offered, she left us the testimony of a love that does not ask but gives. In times when comfort seems to be the law, Gema stands as a mirror and challenge. In the midst of noise, her silence speaks. In the midst of superficiality, her depth moves. In the midst of lukewarmness, her fire burns. Because Gema is a flame that does not consume, but transforms. Her example does not invite sentimentalism, but conversion. To leave everything for Christ, to embrace the cross not as punishment, but as a privilege. To live purity as a gift, suffering as an offering, and prayer as necessary air. She does not show us an easy path, but one that is secure, the path of crucified love. And that is why, more than a century after her death, her figure remains relevant. In every young person searching for meaning, in every sick person offering their pain, in every soul that feels alone and misunderstood, Saint Gemma continues to intercede, accompany, and illuminate. Not with words, but with her life. Because there are saints who shine like suns, and others who burn like hidden embers. Gema was the latter, a living ember, a spark of heaven in a humble room, a flame of Lucca that continues to burn in the heart of the Church. Saint Gema Galgani, flower of the Passion, hidden virgin and ardent soul, pray for us.